Welcome back to the 1090 podcast with Rachel. We're doing part 2 because we just weren't close to done and we were rushing you. And you can't be rushed talking about grief. That's awful. So sorry we did that to you, but you're back. Flew into town this morning. We're doing round 2 and you were walking up the stairs and I was about to hug you. Well, I did hug you. And I was about to hug you and you're like, why am I here again? Why did I come back? Like, and me and Ryan, we had a good laugh because, yeah, like it's so hard to talk about,
Right.
and you were so conflicted on if you should or not, and then
I guess the only reason that I want to do this is that if I share my story, maybe other people will think twice about committing suicide.
Yeah.
Like, just think of the ripple effect that it causes and the hurt that just continues. It's awful. And so I don't want other people to be in my shoes.
Yeah.
So if me using if I have to sacrifice my comfort and somebody benefits from this, then so be it.
Yeah.
I'm
and it's hard because when you're talking about grief, like when you're talking about, and not just grief, but your specific type of grief. You have a husband that died of COVID, and then you have a son that takes his own life a month later. Like this is really difficult, hard to do. And so it's hard to talk about too, because you don't want to offend other people and
Right.
they feel certain ways and they have their thing, and it makes it really hard to talk about because you don't want to upset anyone over the worst thing. So thanks again for being brave enough to share your story with us.
Gotta be something good coming from this, right? I'm like, something. I don't know.
Well, I think already it's helped me. Just watching you talk about it and being completely broken by it and just coming back for round 2. I think it's
crazy. Well, you were saying yourself that you had suicidal thoughts,
yeah.
It's like some people just think it, some people actually do it, but still, it's like
mine. I don't think I ever had like suicide ideation type. Actually, I'm glad you brought that up because the mental illness associated with suicide, like this is a real illness. This is a real disease.
It's an epidemic.
And it's something I didn't have that. I'm dealing with grief. That's much different than Jace dealing with what he was dealing with.
Right.
And that's something that that stigma of like, oh, just pull yourself up with your bootstraps and change your attitude.
Just smile,
get rid of that depression. Like, go blow it out your ass. Like that. Like, that's not the reality we live. Like, these people are legit sick, just like any other illness.
Well, and he wasn't. I don't think his was depression. It was more anxiety, and in the moment, his was like circumstantial. So, and there's a couple different types of situations. You have the depression. You have somebody who's panicking because of a situation, and you have, there's just so many variations to it.
And what, drug use too, or what do you?
He didn't know.
No,
you can have. People have.
Jace? Do you think Jace struggled with?
No, that wasn't his issue. We had a neighbor that her son committed suicide because of, I don't know exact reason. I believe it was alcoholism. But that was only like a little over a year ago. So it was like when she called me on that one, that was hard. He was a little bit older, but still it hurts. Like it's not necessary, you know, but they're battling something inside that they can't find a way to handle it.
No, I just want to make it clear. Like, it's not that they didn't love anyone. It's not that they weren't strong enough. It has nothing to do with any of that. It's just, this is a real illness and
problem.
And unfortunately, the illness that these people have, they're in a culture that no one wants to hear it or talk about it.
Right. And I guess that's what my goal is, like, crack it open. Because if you talk about it and air it, it's like, okay, then it's like a balloon where you take the balloon and you blow up, you like in your mind, you're like, it's growing and growing and growing. But if you can talk about it, every time you talk about it, it deflates.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
I love that analogy.
Like,
because if you go long enough and you don't talk about it,
you're just going to, right? Yeah. And that's what happens. You end up exploding. You're like, forget this. You know what I mean? And unfortunately I've had incidences where, it's been
I
there.
had one of those a couple nights ago. I just popped and I
It's
just
like you just need to talk to somebody, and when it
unloaded
deflates,
with tears and I like that a lot. And when air comes out of a balloon like that, it's gross. It's like there's like spit in it and it's loud.
it's ugly.
It's ugly.
It's ugly,
You don't
right?
it's gross. You don't want to talk about grief. It sucks, but
Yeah.
you need to, or else you're
Right.
gonna pop.
Right. And so just like letting it out. And oftentimes what we let out is ugly, but like rather than keeping it in, like, and that's when we need to we need to understand, like, let somebody speak. And sometimes it's ugly. Sometimes it's not what you want to hear. Sometimes but let them say it.
You don't even have to agree with it.
Right.
Just let them
air it out. Have compassion and like, okay, get these. I think, and it's through talking it out and hearing yourself, you realize, okay, it's not that bad. I'm overreacting. It's, you know what I mean? And it helps you think when you can speak out loud about it. So
like if I'm happy again, or when I'm happy, people think, oh, I didn't love my family that much because he's happy. Okay, like let's actually think about this.
But here's the thing. Do people think that, or do you think people think that?
Thank you. That's exactly what I was about to say is, okay, Mason, who has said that to you? No one. Not one person on planet Earth has ever said that to me. That's just me. That's just me. Like when I'm posting pictures of me being happy, part of me is thinking like, oh,
you
like we're just happy.
Them.
Like, wow, that's me.
Yeah.
And that, and starting a podcast and just having these conversations has helped me figure weird stuff out like
it's
that.
The
like
talking it out, going.
Yeah, like, oh, like, and I think that's when people say things to you that frustrate you or really irritate you, it's probably because part of you agrees with them and knows that they're right. And like you've heard yourself say that about you already. And so like,
you're like, nuh-uh.
It's very like, oh, like it's hard to hear. Anyway, I don't know if that had to do with anything, but
no, but I get it. Cause like for me, I thought people were afraid of me. Like I legit, like people wouldn't talk to me, I felt like. And just every situation was awkward afterwards. Not every, I shouldn't say that. Most situations were very awkward. So I'm like, my thought is everybody's afraid of me. Like, so whether they were or weren't, but that's what I perceived, and that's how I felt. It's like,
so like, yeah.
Don't do that.
Your husband, Joe, passes away.
So he passed away September 21st.
And
no, I'm sorry.
No, sorry. Go ahead.
September 19th. Oh my gosh. Like, why am I getting dates mixed up?
Well, you don't remember the date?
I know.
You didn't love him very much. You don't remember the date.
No, I'm like, I just don't remember it. Like, why is it so hard for me? Yeah, September 19th. And then Jace passed away. We found him October 26th. So it was only about a month.
Yeah, I just want to talk about how your husband dies and you get flowers and food and people talk to you and he was such a great guy and all these things. And then Jace passes away and it's just crickets.
To begin with, it wasn't. My family came in and it was fine. We had the funeral. Actually, I kind of disassociated. Like I was like with the second funeral, I was like, you guys plan it. I was kind of more involved with Joe's. When it came to Jace's, I was like, I cannot do this again. Like I was paralyzed per se. But when we had his funeral, I had some people come in and I guess I hadn't talked to people for a while. So like at the funeral, I went and socialized, and that's not usually me. I'm not really social. And it just felt good to be with people. But then like afterwards, like I would put myself in situations and people didn't know what to say to me, or they'd say something and I'd start crying. And they said, I'm sorry for crying. And like, everything felt so awkward that it was like, and it was situation after situation, like And I just was like, forget this. I can't do this. I cannot be with people. If
Let's just not talk about it.
No, right. And I wanted to talk about it somewhat. Like, I didn't know where I stood.
You didn't know how.
Yes. And like everything was a trigger. And like after Jace, I would touch. I don't know if you had this issue, but I would touch something, see something, and it was like trigger. Everything triggers.
Yeah, I remember from the past. Someone would walk into the room, and I'd be like, "Oh, it's Court." Like, no, not Courtney.
You still think they're going to come home at some point?
Yeah, like yeah, yeah.
Or get a phone call. Hey, is Joe Coffey there? And I'm like, no, he's not.
Yeah, or like you're even today. Like I'll flip on the TV and my TV subscription is through Courtney's email, and her name's just right, and it's great. But it's like, man,
at the beginning, it's hard to see that.
I'm talking at the beginning. Yeah, it's just,
it's just very triggering. But
so after Jace passes away, well, this letter, the note that he left.
So
it ripped my heart out. That thing is brutal.
Yeah. So, like I said, we had his funeral. My family came in, and everybody eventually left. They obviously have to go home. Friends, family came in, and things were hard after that because I didn't talk to anybody about stuff. I just kind of tried to be busy and not think about it, but still being not able to do what I used to do is kind of paralyzing, like I said. So December rolls around. We had Christmas. I didn't do anything. I couldn't even function. Luckily, my older son, he was 22 at the time. He stepped up and he was super helpful and took care of a lot of stuff. And we had a lot of outpouring of help there. But then January hit, and somebody had already taken out the trash, like the can, to the road, and I was taking out a bag to kind of put it in there to fill it up, and before the trash came. And then I see this notebook on the top, and normally I'm like, wouldn't have even thought twice about it, but I picked it up and kind of thumbed through it. On the back of the notebook was this note, and I don't know when this was written. I don't know. Like, I didn't find this notebook. Obviously, somebody did and was trying to throw it away. I think they were trying to prevent me from seeing it. So let me read it to you here, if I can. It says, "Dear family, I never wanted to feel this way. I never wanted to die. I just needed the pain to go away. I was hurting and no one even saw, because nobody cared. Not even my best friend. I'm sorry I did it. I just couldn't take on the pain." When I saw that, I just crumbled to the ground. And I just screamed. I was like, we live out in the middle of nowhere, sort of out of town. And I just remember screaming and just crying. And my mom at the time lives by me in a little house, and she's in her walker, and she must have heard me because she comes out with a tissue eventually and walks back. But I just sat there and crumpled. Like, how do you, as a mom, look at this and see, like, why didn't you say something? Like, I could have helped. Like, everything could have been worked out. Like, I never said anything to me. But I think that he didn't want to be a burden. He didn't, because of my husband passing. I just think that he didn't want to be a burden, and he felt like this was easier but I'm like, you know what? You made things so much harder. And the amount of people it took to keep our family afloat after this is insane. Like, so that was, and after this is when I went really downhill. Like, in fact, my son had come out when I was out there sitting on the ground. He was 10 at the time. And he just kind of gave me a hug and then went on to the neighbors. But after that, he kind of lost it too. And between the two of us, it was not good. I kind of really disassociated after that. I couldn't function.
When you showed me the note today, like just like a gut punch. And I mean, I know what it's like to lose a kid, but not, I mean, I'm so
at their
sorry.
Own hands, you know what I mean? Like, this was unnecessary.
And just like reading these words, hearing your own kid in so much pain, and then feeling like he was so alone and feeling like he couldn't ask for help, like talk to anyone, and the anger and sadness he was expressing. That I don't know how I don't know how you're doing it, honestly. Like, that is, you say, went all downhill from there, and rightfully so. Like, yeah, I'm so sorry. That has to be so hard. I'm not sure how a mom's supposed to deal with that.
Yeah. It was hard because after that, I didn't function. Like, unfortunately, my kids had to take over. I had two girls that.
Yeah, that's kind of how I was. Each laying in bed all day.
So I would. It's hard to admit this. I would leave in my car. I would sit for hours. There's a place south of town. It's called the Boulders. It has these big, huge rocks, boulders, obviously. And I would just go sit in my car and listen to music for hours and hours. And I would just, like, I didn't know where to go. Like, I didn't know what to do. So I would just stay out there. And I couldn't be home because, unfortunately, like, it's hard to admit this too, but home was my place before this. Like, I couldn't care less if I'd go and do other things with other people.
Now home feels.
And then it was like home was hard.
Yeah.
Like, everything was triggering, and I didn't want to be there. And so I would leave for hours on end, and not be there at all. Sometimes, like, after a while, it was, I would lay in bed all day and just disassociate. And
I just stare at the top of the ceiling, or I would sleep in the bottom of Blue's bunk bed and just stare at, like, the bottom of the bed above me. And then, like, I think dissociate is a good word to use, because, like, I'd look at the time and it'd be like 3 p.m. somehow, and I'd be like, whoa, like 4 hours have gone. Like, what? It's just very weird.
Right. Time does not exist, almost.
Yeah.
It's weird. But another thing that helped was after Joe passed, I started playing on the piano. And so that was a huge help. Like, I would just go help for me, but not for them, because I would sit there for I don't know how long. But I started with one song, and then after Jace, I even did it more, because it was like a place to just kind of disappear and forget about all the chaos.
And you have 8 kids left now.
Mm-hmm. And after Jace, they all moved back home, because I guess one had moved out, but he moved back home, kind of be helpful and stuff, and which was good because they each have different roles. But yeah, I'm like, I feel bad that my kids had to step in and take care of and do what I was supposed to do, but I couldn't. The only way that I can describe it, and I don't know what other people have gone through, like, with grief, but for me, I went infantile. I could cry and I could eat and sleep, and that was it, right?
Yeah.
Like, but that's all I could do. Like, I couldn't worry. I couldn't have.
No, that's very much how I describe it. Like, because I knew I couldn't take my own life because of Blue, but, like, I was in this stage of, like,
nothing matters.
Infantile. Yeah. I wasn't living. I just was not dying.
You were existing. That's it.
So this was me. How did you go from that to, like, okay, like, we have to give a shit again, and we have, like, how do you explain going from that to where you are now, being willing to come back on the podcast for round 2 and put yourself through this hell of talking and reading the note?
For me, I guess everybody's journey is different. Like me, it was the music, the piano. It was like I would try to find like any way that would help. Like, and you're just trying everything. I would do scriptures. I would do music. I would do meditation. I would do for me, I think the most helpful things was breath work and gratitude, like focusing on gratitude. Cause like I didn't feel grateful. I felt really like I was mad. I'm sure you went through that phase too, where it's
Well,
like I was.
I think you're still mad a little bit too. I think you're.
But yes,
you
but
get
I'm like,
mad.
but I was mad. For different reasons, I guess, before, like, of what happened and how people treated him, how people treated me, like, and then I could see, like, okay, I could see things in a different light as time went on, so.
What do you mean how people treated him and how people treated you? Just the silence?
So, with him, it was like the situations that he was dealing with. I don't want to go in depth.
Yeah, no problem.
But yeah, like some of the situations that he was in and how people were treating him, it just was really frustrating, and I was mad about that. But then with me, it was like, yeah, I feel like people avoided me. I feel like people were like I was a threat. Like you could get cooties from me, like, or like, it sounds like childish, but it's like. People making assumptions. They would bring, after Jace, they would bring dinners, and they meant well, and they were loving people, but they would bring dinners and they took it to the neighbor's house, and then she would bring it over. And I'm like, I needed connection. I needed people. And everybody assumed that I needed space. I'm like, I don't want space, but I didn't know how to say that. Like, I don't want space. I want connection. Like, and I didn't know that I needed that. And like, so the avoidance was hard. Like,
or maybe like you feel like you didn't feel worthy to get that, maybe. So maybe in some way you were trying to avoid the help from other people too, like the self-sabotage part of it all.
Yeah, and people, in your head you're saying these different things, and people, I just lost my thought, but they assume, and it's like, don't assume, just ask. But the thing is, they would ask me, how can I help? I'm like, I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know what helps at this point, because my house could have burned down and I didn't care.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
What would you want them to do?
Now I kind of made a list. I was like, I need to write a book that says, how can I help? And like going for a walk, that kind of thing. Just somebody being willing to stand by your side and just walk with you and letting you like just talk. Because like I went through Jace, and then I didn't really have anybody to talk to, because I love my family. I have a nice big family, like 12 siblings, and they were amazing. But it was really hard, and it still is hard to talk to them, because they have their guilt and they share it with me. And that hurts. It's like with suicide, everybody, like, they all feel guilty that I didn't do this, or I did this, or, you know what I mean? Like, I wasn't there. I should have been. So you feel that. And it's like, when I hear that, like, I have a hard time laying my stuff on them. And so like someone said to me, it's hard to lift somebody out of the water when you're all drowning. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like friends are huge when it comes to suicide, because you're a little bit less involved. Where the family, it was like with Joe, I was able to lean on them because that was my Joe, that was my person, But Jace was like, he was the oldest. He was like, he was special. I mean, all the kids are, and they all are. But it's like when it's a child, it's so different. And yeah, he was 23, but to me, he's still a child.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people assumed that I had my family. And I did, like I said, I didn't talk to them because it hurt so bad. And it's easier to talk to somebody who's not involved.
Yeah, it's like the friends are kind of outside of the
loop.
the loop
Yeah.
of the guilt of him
Yeah.
taking his, and so they have like, yeah, I understand what you're saying completely, and it's just so it's sad to hear how the not talking about it just causes so much more issues, because now we're just guessing why people aren't talking, and the guesses are probably not accurate.
Right.
And with our grief brain being so sad, the guesses
so negative,
the guesses we're coming up with probably aren't good. Like,
Right.
they don't love me, they don't like that's
Yeah.
not true, but like that's just
That's what it is.
and it's just it gets heavy quick.
But there, I mean, looking back, I'm like, I can see like all the hands that were in there to help out. You know, there's somebody who brought dinner, and one time they stayed. They stayed to help feed the kids. They stayed, and they knew the older boys, so the boys talked to them. It was like so good. And I've taken many a dinners to people, but I've never stayed to actually help with dinner. And usually it's someone's sick or whatever. But I'm like, if someone has a baby, go feed them dinner, but stay. Yeah. I'd never thought about that. So I was like, oh, that was awesome. Or a friend was like I said, I shut down after Jace and was kind of like, I'm not talking with people. I'm not dealing with people, because it was hard. And so it took, this one friend would just text me, hey, you want to go for a hike? Hey, you want to go for a hike? Hey, you wanna, like, over and over and over, until finally one day I was like, okay, I'll go. You know, but it took a lot. Yeah. You know, to get me, it's not giving up. Those who didn't give up. I have one older gentleman from, where is he from? Wyoming. And he would call, and he wouldn't ask me any questions. He just would tell me how I was doing, and he would like just share his life and hope you're doing good. And it's good to talk to you. And he didn't expect anything from me. And it was at the first, it was kind of awkward, but at the same time, like, I knew he cared. Yeah. You know, and so he still calls, and now I'm opening up a little bit more, and I can talk about, I don't talk about Jace and stuff, but I talk about our world. But then like, I was in the middle of, I had torn out our bathroom just before Joe passed, because he was on a trip, and he was going to help. We were going to fix it when he got back. Well, that's when he got sick. And so we were down to one bathroom. We had a friend who came in and stepped in and just like came in and fixed it for us. And it was like heaven sent. But like I said, I would not have asked. I wouldn't have said anything. You know what I mean? Because I didn't care. Like, it didn't matter to me. But now I can see, like, go back and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was a huge blessing that he just came in and helped out. And we were, but it took an army. Like, to think of what else helped. Yeah,
isn't it weird that, like, you wish Jace would have asked for help?
But I couldn't.
But it's so hard for you.
So I'm like, was it an inherited trait?
No,
yeah.
That's not what I mean. It's just, I think it's so ironic. Like, we know. Like, I was talking to Ryan's friend Mitch about his relationship with his parents, and he's like, yeah, I didn't want to ask my parent. His sister committed suicide. And he's like, I didn't want to talk to my parents about it because I didn't want to make it worse for him. I didn't want to ask for help because I didn't want them to feel like
you were a burden to them.
And I'm like, man, this is so messed up, because like, that's part of the reason why his sister took her own life, probably. And they all wish that she asked for help. And here they are, not able to ask for help.
It's like in the book,
like, God,
what's the bravest thing you can do?
Yeah.
In the boy, the fox, the mole, and the horse, is what's the bravest thing you can do? Ask for help.
I think it's hard. I think it's hard to ask for help. I'm just guessing. So I could be wrong. So you can just tell me to go to hell. But I think it's hard to talk about, because you're going to have to talk about hard things. You're going to have to talk about not just your husband dying, but now your oldest son committing suicide and saying how hurt he was and no one cared. That's a brutal conversation to have. Yeah. No one wants to go there and have to talk about those things.
Well, and like, okay, for people that I would meet, Like, hey, so what's the first thing people ask you? Are you married?
Are you married? What do you do for work? How many kids do you have?
How old's your oldest?
Yeah.
So it's like, I can't avoid it. Like, I tried to for a little bit. I was like, I'd hem-haw around it. And I would just like, oh yeah, I was married and he passed, and then I would I wouldn't say anything about my oldest son, but I'm like, you know what? No, this is my story. I'm like, I had to like, because at first I was like, oh, I wanted to protect them because a lot of times I would get deer in the headlight look like, oh my gosh, nobody would know what to say to me, which is fine. And then so I stopped saying anything about it. And then I'd go home and go, wait a second, I'm betraying myself by not saying anything.
Wow, thank you for
you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's how I feel.
And I was like, this is this is my story and I can't hide it. And if I hide it, what benefit does that do to others? And it's like, and then I just make it worse for me. I'm like, I'm done,
Man, that was like the tipping point I think I kind of approached too. Is like I have to talk about it. It's what's made me. It's who I am. It's part of my identity.
Now,
so like, how do I live a life where I don't talk about that? So I started a podcast.
Hard, it hurts. But.
What advice would you give a mom going through a similar thing with a kid taking his own life? Like the 3 years that you've been going through your grief journey, like this 90%, like what you've been doing about it, what has worked, what hasn't worked?
What hasn't worked? Dwelling on it, avoiding it, I guess you could say. As far as advice.
But like dwelling on it and avoiding it, those are like, this is grief because those are like two different ideas. Right. Well, don't dwell on it. Well, you gotta talk about it.
But you have to face it. Right, you have to face it.
No, it's.
I guess I went through a pretty dark phase, and which made me understand a little bit more like what Jace went through, because back up a little bit. Jace would have asked me normally for help. That's why I don't understand. He was the type, hey mom, can I use the car? My car's not working. Great, I'll be glad to. He would usually come to me. He wouldn't go to his dad. Like that's what was really hard. He would usually ask me for help. And that's what, like, in this moment, he didn't. And I don't understand. Only thing I can think of is the not sleeping, and just being anxious and not wanting to be a burden.
And I think your husband just died.
And so he's
like, well, I can't ask you for help. Just like my buddy Mitch, like I can't ask my parents for help because they're going through it.
But I'm like, I would rather you ask for help and deal with this.
Yeah, I'm like, dude, your parents, that's probably the number one thing they want to do, Mitch, is help you right now. It's probably like the number one thing.
And asking for someone for help, I've realized, like, gets them out of thinking about themselves. And some, like, you know what I mean? For me, it's when someone's asked for your help, it's like for instance, my brother was having a rough time right before I came last time with a work situation. And he called me. He's like, I'm sorry to bother you right now. I'm like, no, this is great because I'm so anxious. Yeah. I can give you a pep talk. And in the meantime, I'm like, okay, it's my own pep talk at the same time. You know what I mean? No, you can do this. You've got this, And I'm
so like, true.
So it's so
funny.
In essence, he pulled me out of my like anxiousness, not completely, but it helped me.
Yeah.
And so I think oftentimes we think that asking, and I'm guilty of it too, asking for help is hard, but for a mom, I don't know. So going through this, I went through a deep, dark phase. And honestly, like, it's hard to admit this, and I haven't told my kids this. But I think some of them have read my journals by now. I was not in a very good headspace because, like, with suicide, the guilt eats you alive. If I should have done this, I could have done this. If I would have done, like, all your parenting mistakes come back to haunt you. And so it's like, oh, that time I did this. Maybe if I had done this different, or, and it just eats you alive. So I honestly can say, like, I didn't want to be here. I didn't. Like, I struggled. Like, I remember one time, it was 4th of July, and I was sitting there,
pool party. And my thoughts were so bad. I was sitting at that pool party and I was just eventually just started crying out of nowhere. Like I was just trying to hide everything and I couldn't. And then later that night, I ended up going to see my bishop because like my thoughts were not in a good place. And I'm like, I need help. And I didn't even tell him exactly what was going on, but just going to somebody and just kind of like knowing that somebody cared enough to sit with you and listen to you or just be there. So there's multiple occasions where I'm like, I just had to go show up at somebody's house because of how bad off my head was. Like, I couldn't, there was thoughts that I had that I feel like had a grasp on me and I couldn't get rid of them with like as much as I tried. And so it wasn't just one event that finally helped me snap out of it. It was asking for help and going to people's houses multiple times and different people. And just like, so I can understand, I guess, to a point where Jace was, not exactly, but I'm like, okay, I know that depth of pain in a different way. Maybe it wasn't because of I guess it was circumstantial for me, but at the same time, it took me down this negative road. And, for me coming out of it, it was like I had to focus on gratitude. I would try to be grateful for the past and the moments that I could remember that were good, and just doing breath work, running. I exercised like crazy because running, it felt like I tried to avoid medication, and that was hard too when people would be like, have you tried medication? Have you tried counseling? And I'm like, I'm trying it. I'm like, just listen, please. I just, you know what I mean? I'm trying everything I can think of to help. And, but me, I'm like, I'm not a quick fix person. And unfortunately, I'm kind of like a do-it-myselfer.
And you're in a situation that can't be fixed either. Like,
right. And I could have gone on medication, but at the same time, like, okay, so I had an uncle who got put on medication. And then, mind you, this is 30 years ago, maybe. And he committed suicide. So in my head, I'm thinking, well, that didn't help, so I'm paranoid about going on medication because I'm already having issues, let alone go on the medication. So I was trying to avoid that. I did it for like 3 weeks one time, but I couldn't sleep with it. I'm like, this isn't helping. It was just making me more anxious. So, but it was the gratitude. I had to focus on gratitude. It was the songs I would sing. It was the words I would put on my mirror. I would put words like either scriptures or quotes or conference talks. I would put any words that were helpful that I could just kind of see and just absorb.
Like, you're just in a battle, like this grief.
I am.
It's a war zone. And
you're
just putting up.
Yeah, I feel like you're in a war.
You're like.
And your thoughts are the war. It's like, okay, I felt like I was losing control and it was bad. Like there was one time I remember I would repeat like, what's wrong with me? Like over and over and over. Like I didn't realize how much I was saying it until my 4-year-old said, what's wrong with me? And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want him saying that, because I started, I don't know if you did this, but I'm like, I started talking to myself out loud and it was terrible.
Yeah. In the car.
Yeah. And I'm just like, I was assuming what people were saying about me or like how they were avoiding me or like, I just, but honestly, it was just forcing myself to like find the good because otherwise I was battling this demon, and it was calling on friends. And like I said, I didn't, for the first, I think 5 months, I didn't talk to anybody. And then one night I called a friend just sobbing and she's like, you need to call your bishop right now. And like, so I called him and I remember crying so bad that the next morning my eyes were almost sealed shut. I wonder if I wouldn't have held it in for so long, just trying to be strong, but it is what it is. I can't go back.
Yeah.
But as far as advice for somebody else, I hope that nobody else has to go through this. That's all I can think. Like, cause this was hell, and It rocked our world, like family, because everybody, not only am I going through grief, I have 8 other children that are going through it as well.
And they're going through it differently at different
Yes,
ages,
at different times,
and
at different ages.
stages of
My
life.
10-year-old, it threw him for a loop. And one night we were having a really rough time, and he yells out, "You blame me for everything because I'm the one who started it." And that just crushed me. Like you say, your thoughts, you think things, but they're not necessarily true. He was the first one. He thinks he was the first one to get sick with COVID.
So he thinks
he's the one who started this. And I'm like, as a 10-year-old, to take that on, that broke a mom's heart.
Do you talk about Jace with your kids a lot, or do you talk? How do you guys go about discussing this as a family?
I'm not the best at it. The little ones have been helpful. Like, I think I shared this before, but there was one night we're laying in bed, and I think it was Max, my 3-year-old, he says, how did Daddy die? And I said, Daddy was sick. How did Jace die? And I said, he took too much medicine. And I didn't realize what they thought of that, because I don't even know what to say to them.
It's so hard, yeah.
And so it wasn't until recently I brought it up again, and my daughter said, she was 7 at the time it happened, and we've talked a tiny bit about it because I'm just I don't know what to say. But recently she said, "You mean Jace did it on purpose?" And I was like, how do you tell she's now almost 10, but I'm like, how do you tell her? I'm like, yeah. So we've cracked it open a little bit more recently.
And it truly, I mean, and you might be listening and be like, "Oh, well, you just say this," but when it's your dead kid and it's
hard,
and it's your kid and you're looking into their eyes and the way their eyes look, it's not easy conversation.
No. No, and they're just, and unfortunately, one time I said Jace went to be with Dad, and I was like, "Oh, that sounds."
It's hard because you're probably worried. Like, I don't want you to get that thought though, but
right.
like,
so you have to be careful of what you say and how you say it, and
plus in your own mind, you're like, I don't know, like I'm sad and mad, and I don't really even know. That's like your head, and so you're like, what answer?
So we've just kind of cracked that open. Like, they little ones know now, like, that he did it on purpose, but they thought he just. I think they thought that taking too much medicine was accidental, and I wish it was that case. But he had taken sleeping pills, and he did it on purpose. Like, I remember when they told me when they had said we found Jace, and I knew that he was gone in that moment, and I said, "What happened?" And he said that he had 2 bottles of sleeping pills in his car that were empty, and not to mention he had a hose in the back of his trunk. So I think he had like a plan B. If this didn't work, I'm just going to do this, because he had already taken sleeping pills the week before, and it didn't work. So. Yeah, but it's like, how do you have the discussion with little kids? And I'm going to have this discussion over and over, because as they grow, their comprehension changes.
And you're having a discussion and one of your kids thinks it's their fault. And so, like, how do I give them the honest details, but then also walk them down this path without them making it feel like it's their fault? I think one thing would be, like, sometimes I think it's my fault, and I think it's natural to think it's your fault, but it's not. But
that's a good way to put it.
But even telling him that, it's like, because that's what makes grief hard. Like, people can tell you the right things, but it doesn't click still. Like,
right. It's like Mother's Day for me. Everybody's like, "Oh, you're such a good mom. You're such a." I'm like, honestly, those words hurt, because I don't feel like how can you say that? Like, my son took his life. You know, how can you say that I'm a good mom if that's what happened? That's the outcome I have. I took 23 years, you know what I mean? And this is the outcome, you know? It's like, it still hurts. I can't go to church on Mother's Day, or I cannot be involved because I'm like, it hurts too much.
The day-to-day guilt I have is a lot. I think I can't imagine. How do you deal with that? How are you managing that day to day?
Or I don't. Some days I do, some days I don't.
Yeah.
It's just I'm learning to just try to savor what I have. I've tried to be like just try to be a better person, a better mom, a better like find out what really matters. Like before I was very busy doing stuff and I thought that was good. I thought being busy and getting things done was,
Me too.
productive and that was what you're supposed to do. And I'm like, no, I'm done. I'm just because I'm like, I want to savor my children. I want to teach them and I want to put words in their heads that are gonna they're gonna uplift them and make them be better people. And like in fact, one of the things I struggle with Jace was like the fact that he went to public school. And looking back, I'm like, he was not meant for public school. He was brilliant, but he needed a different way. He wasn't the sit down book type. He was the I'm going to figure it out with my hands type.
You really run through every decision you've made.
Mm-hmm. I do.
Yourself.
I do. I'm like, I shouldn't have sent him to school. I should have done it. No, it's like that. Everything you. Yeah.
So like, Joe dies, Jace dies. You have everyone's gonna die. We're all gonna die. What's the point of anything? What are we doing? Like, what do you do with that? Do you have those thoughts?
How do you handle like everything else?
Yeah, like I'm gonna die one day. Blue's gonna die one day. We're all gonna die one day.
I know.
So what are we doing?
Do you want me to tell you my honest opinion?
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna go churchy here. You like?
I don't know. Yeah. I'm just.
So I personally believe that that we'll be together again, like through Joe and I were sealed in the temple. Our family was sealed together. We'll be together again. And so it's honestly having that hope for the future. Like I will have my family back and I will have that family unit back. Because for me, like family is everything, So I guess it's like recently like that hope has come back. Like this is just temporary. This life is just temporary. And it's like the future is that we'll be together again. And this is just the test. And I'm like, I don't want to go churchy with you, but
hey,
I do believe that there's
I don't care. You can do whatever you want.
Because of the things that I've seen and like I debate whether to share this with you or stuff. I have seen.
Hey, you can. I'm not going to be offended. It's fine.
No, I know, but like whether people believe this or not, or whatever,
it doesn't. It's your thing, like, your story. This is like, you.
One time, it was Jace. My sister's birthday is September 21st, and that's the day he went missing. And so I've tried to like go out and like let's go do something for your birthday, so that she's not dwelling on it because she feels guilty too, And so.
Man, everyone just feels guilty. And so we're all just trying to protect each other, not feeling guilty. And by doing so, we all feel more guilty.
So we're trying to get out of it. But anyways, there was...
And sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but it's still... I mean, I did a podcast. I did a podcast with my brother's trainer. And we're just telling stories my brother raised, and it's great. And then he's like... I don't even remember what I asked. Or...
it was about if he had met up with him. I saw that one.
And he's blaming himself.
It's like,
and
if I would have just met up with him, then maybe this wouldn't have happened.
It's like, it's just took the wind out of it. It's just like, oh, gut punch. Like, I thought it was like the ripple effect that you talked about. Like, how many people associated with my family feel guilty? Probably a lot more than I even realized.
Right, but you didn't until you cracked that open.
Right, I had no idea. I had no idea he thought that.
Yeah,
and obviously
he was planning to meet up.
Tim, if you're listening, it's obviously not your fault at all. But he feels awful.
Yeah, so we do. But like we went to breakfast, and on the table was a glass jar, and. This is like Joe used to work at Promised Land Dairy, and they had glass milk bottles, and they were using it. I don't know if they were using it for vases or I think it was for the drinks, for the water. And it was kind of reminding me of that hymn like through that, just seeing that. Because like you say, you see things all around you that remind you of them and like of the past that triggers you. And so that was there. But then the waiter comes up and he has a tattoo on his arm. And I just kind of like, hey, what does your tattoo mean? Oh, it's a letter from my dad who passed away. And I was like, wow. I was like, how old are you? 25. I was like, at the time, this is how old my son would have been. Like, would have been 25, and this is the 24 anyways. He comes back, and the words he spoke to me, I was like, just jaw dropped. Like, as he came back, each time we had a little more conversation. I don't remember if I told him, I think I told him about Jace at that time. And he said something to me was kind of like jaw dropping. He's like, maybe there's something you need to learn about from this. And I was like, is this from you? Like, I don't know.
Or maybe it's from Jace or
so I'm
Joe
like, yeah, it was just like the whole situation. Yes, it felt like that. And so it was very like, it was just dumbfounding. Like, I don't know how to describe it. But then as I left, I think I didn't tell him it was about Jace that I told him that to begin with when at the table. And then as I left, I told him about Joe a little bit. He gave me this big hug and then I left. But then 6 months later, it's probably about 6 months later, I was going down to Tucson. My sister was moving. I was taking my trailer down there. And the tire blew on the trailer. And I pull over. I didn't have the stuff to change it. I knew I didn't have a jack. And I got out of the car and I just looked at the thing and I started sobbing. I was like, I don't know what to do. Because usually I have my husband to call or something. And I could have called my sister, but they're moving. And I'm like just panicking. Within a minute, these two boys hop out of their car and they come up like, hey, do you need help? And I'm like, yes, I would love some help. They get out there and they do. One of these boys it was crazy because he was about my son's size and he was about the same age, skinny little thing. And then when he's done, he says, can I give you a hug? Mm-hmm. And then he went on his merry way. And I was like, that's not just a coincidence. I don't know. To me, it was like, I'm just seeing more and more of these where it's like, what is going on? And I don't know if you've had those incidences, but like just those tender mercies that kind of help out and like, okay, we can do this. And like, they're there. They are there. I feel like, but it took me a long time to get there because my kids, when I looked at them, it was very triggering. I'd be like, oh, that's Joe. Like this Jace, he would do that. You know what I mean? Like, it was just like, and all you can think about to begin with is the loss. You can't even see the beauty that you have in front of you. And so it wasn't until I started seeing, I'm like, I have all these beautiful children still. I need to focus on them and helping be a better person so that I can raise them. And I'm trying to do things a little differently so that, and just fix myself, improve myself so I can be a better example to them, and just keep the lines open and communication open, sort of. I don't know. It's been really hard to talk about it like amongst each other, and I'm not the greatest at it. But it's funny because the little kids like AC, who's almost 8 now, he will be like, "Oh, my dad's dead." He just says it like it is.
Kids are the best, man.
In fact,
they'll just say it, right? We need
on my
kids.
phone. The other day he changed my phone screen to my son.
Aw.
You see that? And he was like, I just miss him. I just wanted to see it. I'm like, okay. Like, he's just not afraid of it. And I'm like, and that's where I need to be. It's like, but it hurts. I'm like, I look at that picture and it's like,
it hurts so bad.
Like when I see his smile and his like, how could you do this? But I know that hurt, and it's hard to suffer through that. I know it's hard to push past that pain and the uncomfortable feelings. But I'm like, you know what? I tell people like one day it will ease, and maybe it takes 3 years, maybe it takes 5 years, but I'm like, keep pushing through, keep with the hope. Cause it's like, if you lose hope, that's what happens. You give up. And it's like, and I'm just trying to drill it into my kids. Like, do not give up. Like keep going. There's something beautiful on the other side of hard. I remember, and it's the people who've been in my life that have helped me like to see that the little glimpses. I had my bishop would come over and he would plow the weeds on my property. We have 5 acres and they would get crazy. And I used to be able to keep up with them and then I didn't care. So he'd come over and do that. I had other people who came in and help, like just friends. I'd have friends that just show up and just would go talk to me we'd go out, or I'd go to like, hey, stop by the house anytime. Someone had told me, call or text anytime. It's those things, those words that were people said that were helpful. And there's some words that hurt a lot, but it was those people who reached out and did. Like some people would say, oh, I wanted to, but I felt, or I was afraid to. And I was like, well, that's where you went wrong. When you're afraid, when you're acting on fear or being afraid, like it's holding you back. Where you act on faith, faith will make things better. And honestly, a lot of times when people would come to first, it was awkward. But when they kept coming, it was like, okay, I was able to like trust and to open up more. And then I could know who was okay with me just being a mess, because grief is ugly.
Yeah, like figuring out like who's gonna accept me in this shit show of all these emotions that I'm dealing with. Like no one wants to be around me. Yeah. And
one time
finding these people that like, yeah, I'll accept you in your grief.
One time, this is hard to admit because it was ugly, but I was overwhelmed, a lot of rough feelings, and I ended up taking out on my sister, which I didn't mean to, but I did. And then I didn't want her to leave without like fixing, like, okay, let's fix this up. I ended up taking a bat to my son's trailer. I still have the trailer there. It's like, I ended up just.
I would love to see that.
I was I ended up taking it back. I was so the rage is so insane.
Yeah,
like you probably know it. It's like this scream that's inside of you, waiting to get out, but you like are afraid to let it be heard. So like I literally took a bat to my son's trailer and I just like pounding it. And unfortunately, my kids were there. I'm like, okay, don't do this later. But it like, and then afterwards, I just sat and cried, and she just sat with me, and I was like, it's just there's so many intense emotions, and it's like.
It's exhausting.
It is.
It's
and I'm like,
so
and
exhausting.
I don't like, that's what I tell people too. It's like, don't judge people off of behavior, because behavior is just them in their head trying to satisfy something that's going on mentally. You know what I mean? Love them for, you can't even, behavior is not who they are.
Yeah, like have some grace for them in their grief. Like,
and so, and thankfully people have, there's.
How do you deal with, you've been through like so much. How do you deal with people who are just dealing with their car broke down, or maybe my son won't get into college, and you're like, how do you deal with that?
I just compassion, like that's their hard. You know what I mean? My heart, and that's one thing people would say to me. I'm not trying to compare. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to. People would say that I'm not trying to compare. They would start telling me their stuff, and they're like, "I'm so sorry. I'm not trying to compare." And I'm like, I am not a comparing person. You know what I mean? I'm like,
no, that gets lost on me. But you're right. Like everyone's been pushed to their max, whatever their max might be,
right.
And it's not my fault that they haven't been. Like what
they don't understand.
Yeah, like
there's
it's hard to have compassion sometimes. Like I feel like sometimes I do, and then other times I'm like, shut up, like. I would love
me though.
I would love it if Riggins didn't get into college and he was alive today and came home and cried to me about how he didn't get into college, and I could comfort him and figure out that issue and what we were going to do next. That sounds
lovely, right?
I'd do anything for that.
Right. And I think that's too, is hard time being around people or like mom groups and stuff like that. Because the conversations end up being like so simple. And I'm like, I want to talk about depression. I want to talk about grief. I want to talk about, I want to talk about suicide. I want to talk about like what I want to talk about is completely different.
Like show me the skeletons in the closet, like nice car in the garage, but like show me like, it's
hard. But at the same time, I'm not, like, if you're going to talk to me, like, I'm generally the type of person who just listens.
Yeah.
So I tend to just let people talk, and I don't share a whole lot. That's my downfall. Like I've realized like last time when I was here, I realized there's stuff I haven't shared with my children about this. And then I have like little kids
Did you feel bad for like, well, did you feel bad mentioning it on the podcast, but you haven't mentioned it to them yet? Because that happens to me. Like, oh, I haven't mentioned this to Sammy yet. Like, I feel bad. Like, this is the first time I'm talking about it.
Right.
That happens to me all the time. And I feel.
And like, I have
But again,
kids.
like, that's why the podcast exists. Right. So I can go here and talk about these thoughts and feelings with.
But at the same time, they've never asked either. It's
right.
Like, I think we're just afraid to like.
Well, you didn't ask. Well, you should have told me. Well,
right.
Yeah, it's just.
But I honestly would like to get like them to write out their perspective of what happened and then put it together so that at least my little kids know like the story of all of it, so that it doesn't get in the future, in 10 years from now, this is like a part of us, but they don't know what happened, kind of thing. Like, because they were so little, or even just collecting stories of Jace and Joe, but it's so hard to talk about.
I will say, I don't know a lot of things, but one thing I'm confident in saying about grief is, it's just like it's just like anything else. Practice will make it easier, better, and the more I've talked about it, the easier it's been to talk about it. And then the more I've talked about it, I've been able to get to the good, the joy, the love, the good times, the gratitude,
right,
and not be so just mad all the time. I'm able to get to that part more, but it's only because I keep talking about it so much. And I don't know where I'd be if I didn't start a podcast and talk about it over and over and over again. Because and I used to not be able to talk. I used to just cry. I'd go to my therapist Matt and I just cry. And then I finally was able to start talking about it and lots of tears. And then, you just get stronger.
How long after did you start the podcast?
Exactly a year.
Okay.
So on the anniversary, I uploaded the first podcast.
I wasn't even functioning in a year. I don't even remember.
Well, I don't know if functioning was an appropriate word for me at that time either, even though I started a podcast. Yeah, it's just, I mean, there were things you were like driving to, listening to music and driving to that spot. Like that was the podcast for me. It was just, it gave me something to do. It gave me an area to put my grief that felt good, like felt like it was productive versus just self-sabotage and feeling sorry for myself and being mad at everyone. And so it just gave a healthy outlet for
and a place to talk about it.
Yeah. And I don't know if we were talking about this before we recorded or not, but we were joking, like, when do we talk about it? Like, before you go to work, when you get home from work, before the movie, like, when do you want me to, ruin your day?
Right. And the thing is, for me, it's hard to, like, I don't want to be emotional in front of my kids. I don't want to be, but you bring it up, but I'm, you
need to sometimes, I think.
I do, but I'm like, I tried, I don't know, like the big emotions, I just avoided them, which is probably not healthy. But that's what I did. I hope that they will one day forgive me, because I feel like I was not there for 2 years. In fact, there was one night in October. It was coming up on the second year, and my son was like, we had an argument, and it was kind of, I took it as like a wake up call to be like, Mom, you're not here. Like, and I didn't, it was just their cry for like, Mom, we need you here. We need you to be present, because I wasn't. And so I really tried to be home more, even though it was extremely hard. I just tried to be more present. And it's taken a long time to be able to be there and to be able to enjoy being there. And like dinners, oh my gosh, dinners. We used to do dinners all the time. Gather everybody, had dinners. My husband and I cooked a lot together. And like dinners, for some reason, were crazy triggering. Like I could not cook. So we just did basics. And in fact, my daughters took over most of it, I want to say, for a long time. And even now, I still have a hard time getting dinner on the table. I think it's because, I don't know, it's like just because I get the family together and it's not all of us. We're missing. Some of us are missing. So, just there's so many triggers. It's crazy. But, so yeah, I think that was like a wake up call for my kids. Like, we need you here.
Yeah, I remember I was doing the same thing. Like, I don't even remember a lot of it, but I woke up one day from like a nap or something and just didn't know where Blue was, because Blue was either watched by Courtney's sister, my parents, Courtney's parents, my brother. Like, there's just so many people that were willing to help me in Blue. So Blue was just, whoever was taking care of him at the time. And I just remember, what house is he at today? Like, I just didn't even know.
You're just
and
oblivious.
I just remember, as much as I hated myself already for not being in the car and not being with my family, just hated it. Dude, you can't even be a father to Blue now. That's the only thing. You love being a dad. And you can't even do that now. The way you're handling this is killing what you have left.
Right.
And
you can't even see what's in front of you. Yeah.
And the we is greater than me is what pulled my love for Blue. And yeah, that's just kind of what kept me. It's like we were talking about earlier, how we were just in this phase of being a zombie almost.
Mm-hmm.
You're just not dying. But I had to learn to have a desire to want to do life again and feel worthy of being happy and trying to be productive again, because all of it just felt like betrayal at first.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be folding laundry and just be like, "You're a piece of shit. How can you just fold laundry?"
Right.
I'm like, "Well,
something's got to do.
I don't know what to do." I don't know.
Just I'm doing it and walking around all this stuff needs to be done, and I just don't care. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was hard. I had luckily because my youngest was barely turned 3. He turned 3 when my husband was in the hospital, and then I had 4-year-old and 6-year-old, I guess at the time, and so they were little. Luckily, my neighbors were heaven sent, and they took the kids I don't know how much, but they were over there a lot. And they if it weren't for that, I would have had to send them away because I was not. And if it wasn't for my girls and my older sons, there's no way we would have survived. I would have just had to disperse or just to literally send them away because I was not present. I was there, but I was not there. And the only way that I can describe it to people is like I said, you're infantile. And then you're this raging toddler who's just mad at everything and mad at the world. And then you're this teenager who's doesn't want any responsibility. All responsibility feels very, very heavy, right? Yeah. And it's and you just want to avoid. You just want to go out and have fun. You just want to be gone.
No accountability.
Yes, no accountability. I don't want to be there.
Yep.
And then it's okay, finally I'm starting to have a little bit of balance.
Well, this is so true. I went through all these phases.
Yep. See, it's and I think with grief, they have the 5 stage or they have the stages, the steps.
Yeah, it's all horseshit anyway. But,
I think it's this monthly cycle, or not monthly.
Yeah,
but it's
monthly or daily,
or
or whatever. Or you might be stuck in one for a year,
right? And it's okay, that's not just because I thought it was okay, you're sad, then you're mad, then you're happy.
That's what I thought too, and then I'll accept it. And then I graduate with acceptance, take our hats off,
hits you,
and then I'm good. No, you're done.
I feel you'd be I'm good, I got this, and then something would hit you, and it's do you really have this? Yeah. You know what I mean? It would hit you hard.
Or how dare you say you have this?
Exactly.
Actually,
and so they had a church function. And it was a primary activity, and they had this theme. It was red, and I'm going to get red shirts for my kids. They're all excited. And then when I went to go I picked up the red shirts to get them all matching red shirts, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is Jace's favorite color. Everything, just red. It was red from the time so I started just panicking. I'm I'm gonna have to walk into a room, avoid talking about him. And the whole room is red. The kids are all in red. And it just sounds stupid now talking about this, but it was very triggering to me at the time because because I couldn't just, me being me, I was not willing to say anything to anybody. And I remember I didn't want to go. My kids wanted to go. So I was okay, I'm going to suck it up and I'm going to go. And I sat there for a little while and I was just so stuck in my head. And I finally went outside and I sat on the sidewalk outside because I just couldn't be in there anymore. And then this girl, after a while, this lady comes out and she just sits by me and she wraps her arms around me. And I just sobbed. And it's something about somebody just giving you a hug and giving you permission And that's all you need. It's like giving you permission to just
feel all of it.
Yes. And she didn't ask me anything. She didn't talk to me. She just sat there and just hugged me. And I was just like, that was it. And I just sobbed. I don't even know how long I was I think that's been the most helpful is when someone just is willing to show up, just listen with like open arms, and I'm not a hugger. I was not a hugger before. Now it's like, I'll take all that I can get. I don't know about you, but it's a weird thing. It's like, this isn't.
Yeah. People ask me like, what should I do to someone who just lost a loved one? And I'm like, you're not going to really know what to say. But just show up and be ready to listen. You don't really need to have much to say. Just be ready to listen and hug them and cry with them.
Yep.
And
there's a scripture that says, mourn with them, those that mourn. It's like all it is just sit there and just let them be in their thoughts, whether they want to say anything, whatever. Sometimes I felt like saying something. And honestly, I didn't open up to a lot of people. Like I keep my, unless it's a purpose or unless somebody asks, I really didn't say a whole lot.
Yeah, just hold me and cry. Don't tell me it will be okay. Don't tell me how your grandpa died at 91 years old and you know how I feel. Don't do that.
I had some teenagers show me how to do it. So one time was a football game, and this boy, Canton Bluer, he comes up, he looks at me, he sees me, his eyes light up. Because mind you, most people were like, I felt like saw these sad eyes. I would introduce myself to somebody, and as soon as I would know whether they heard my story or not, because of their eyes. Mm-hmm. And so it was like all these sad eyes were really hard to see. But then this boy comes up and he sees me, bright eyes, and he comes up and he gives me a hug and went on his merry way. And I was like, oh, another teenager. It was a basketball game. Every time she would see me, she would bright eyes, just happy to see me. She'd give me a hug. She'd sit beside me, and she would she'd just tell me about her day. Like she wouldn't ask. Like she wouldn't have. I didn't have to say anything. She was like, just tell me about her day, and then she went on her merry way. It was like when you can give a little spark to somebody, just be a little light. Yeah. Like that was huge to me. Just. I don't know. It was, and it's hard because when you're going through, you don't see what people have done or did. And I realized too, if your love language is time, then things don't matter. Like you don't see that as compassion or love. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. If you want a phone call, a text is like, yeah, I appreciate that, but you don't see it in the moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, people would text and I was like, I'm just not a texter. So,
your generation doesn't text. You're all bad at it.
Mm-hmm. Like I want a person. But at the same time, it's hard because I was so quiet. And I think
you're so divided in your own head. Like part of you doesn't want to see anyone, part of you does. Part of you wants to yell at everyone, part of you wants to hug it. And so you're just so.
And it's the back and forth, right? So one time I'm like, I just want to hug the world because I want to make the world a better place. And then other times I'm like, I'm so consumed with me and what I lost. I can't give to anybody. And it's
I wanted to do this to end because you gave me all these books that I love. I mean, I love these books that you brought, and I wanted to give you a book. It's a kid's book. It'll take you like 5 minutes to read it. Maybe it's awesome, but you could use it in your family and your kids. I used it with Blue, and it was so good. But as we were talking, so I did a podcast with Jessica and her husband, the author of the book. And it's funny because we were talking about how and we were talking about this too, it's different for everyone, how we handle the grief.
Right.
And we were talking about her book. And so it's called ABC of Grief. And so each letter of the alphabet represents something like K is for keepsakes, L is for layers, N is for stages of grief or no stages of grief. Anyway, and we're talking about how some people really feel one letter a lot and then maybe not so much the others.
Right.
And I was flipping through her book during her podcast, and we got to the letter V, and I just kind of lost it on the letter V and started to cry a little bit. And it's what we were saying. So V is for valid. My grief is valid, even if others don't understand it. And yeah, I just feel like that's...
Because you just want to be validated. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something that I just try to provide people with the podcast, at least. Is I know I'm not going to be able to fix any of your issues, Rachel, but I hope just creating a space where it can be talked about has done a lot for me.
And my hope is to see, like, it took a family of 12, you know, like my siblings. It took my husband's family. We would go to my brother-in-law's. It took 3 ward families. It took and lots of friends outside that to keep and hold our family together through all this. So like my hope, and by sharing this, is that somebody can see the ripple effect that it caused by one person. One person is more valuable than you realize. And it's like, if I can hope, like, I hope that somebody else can see their value through all this.
Yeah, it's sad because they feel so alone, and if they would just understand the ripple effect that they'd leave behind with their like, I don't even think they grasp that.
No,
because
you're thinking of the now.
They feel so alone. They don't.
Yeah, you're thinking of the moment now. It's like if I hadn't thought about my kids and them and like being there for them, then I, like you say, I didn't want to be here.
Yeah.
But have you seen the movie The Never-Ending Story?
I haven't.
Okay, you need to go watch it.
I thought you weren't a movie girl. I thought we weren't even doing movies.
Okay, but this one here, hear me out. Okay,
Rachel, round 2 is a little different here. I like it. We're doing movies.
No, but if you think about it, you have to go watch it. It's about the nothingness and this all-consuming nothingness to begin with, right? Uh-huh. And then towards the end, as he's getting, I don't remember the exact. It's been a long time since I've watched it. But he has to go through these 2 sphinx, I believe it is. And the only people who can go through that are those who believe in themselves and trust themselves, or they will not get through. The eyes open, and then he gets shot with these lasers, per se. So it's kind of, I'm probably.
So what's the moral of the story? I like this.
Wait. Okay, so if he can get past those 2 sphinx, right, and not doubt himself, on the other side is his good luck dragon. So if we can just have hope and faith in ourselves and trust ourselves and learn to get past those hard things and believe that we can, on the other side is your good luck dragon.
Yeah. I think that's beautiful.
But it's like we have to start thinking that hard is beneficial, not hard is stoppable. Like,
yeah, I think with grief, like when you compare that to grief, like you gotta go through the hell to get to that to get to the good part.
The song, have you heard of the song? The bear goes over the mountain.
No, can you sing it for us?
No.
No, Ryan's got a guitar.
What is it? It's like you can't go over it. You can't go around it. Yeah. You can't go under it. You have to go through it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's
I think there's like a scout camp.
Yes, there's a bunch of different ones. But yeah, it's like
now you brought back all these Boy Scout camp trips. Yeah, you're right though. You can't go around it. You can't
go under it. You can't go. You have to go through it, and through it is ugly. And it's like, but once you get through it, on the other side, for me, I feel like there's this other part of joy that I've never experienced before.
Wow.
And seeing like, okay, how can we savor every moment of life? Because we don't know what's next.
Wow, yeah.
You know what I mean? How can I savor life? How can I bring joy to others so that they trust me and can come to me if there's a problem, or if there's like I don't know, just being that light for others that were there for me. Because honestly, if those people hadn't been there for me, I don't know that I would be here. So I want to be that light for others.
The we is greater than me.
Right.
Wow, you gave us a song and a movie and a book. So yeah, I love this book. Help Me in Blue. So I'm gonna give it. Cool. You gave me 3 books, so I'm like, I gotta give her. And no big deal, but
that's cool.
She did sign
My kids will love it. Oh, that is cool.
So there you go. Big time.
So, and yeah, I've thought about writing some books because like there's got to be a purpose to this.
I like your book idea. How to help. What was the book title you mentioned?
How Can I Help?
How Can I Help?
Yeah, because people often would ask, how can I help? I'm like, in that moment,
You don't know what to say ever.
Right.
I don't think I ever told someone how they could help, actually.
But if they have a book that says, this is what helped me, and if I go talk to other people and say, this is what helped, then we have a list of all these things. And I thought about writing another book, like thank you notes, all the people who did stuff for us, the thank yous, because I owe so many people so much, like just because the support that we received was insane.
Yeah.
It was amazing. So
thank you so much for coming on again. Anything else? Last chance? Anything else you want to say before we
I don't
wrap
think
it
my
up?
story is going to end here. So, okay.
Oh yeah, remember we were
hold on.
texting? We were texting after part 1, and I'm like, hey, we got to have you on again. And you're like, yeah, like my story's never going to end though. And I'm like, yeah, it's true. Like, we'll just come on for like another hour and then we'll leave you alone or something like that. But I'm glad.
No,
I mean, you're right. It's always going to continue to evolve.
It's like we lived in this tiny house when things happened, and Joe and I,
like 1,100 square feet for nine kids.
No, there's 11 of us in the time.
Oh my, that's
10 of us.
That's
a lot, right?
That's enough to be on the 1090 podcast. Like just 9 kids in a trailer.
We had always had this plan to build a house on the other property is on the side of us because we'd split the property, and so if they like one thing after another, it just kept holding us back. On August, when Joe got sick, we were supposed to build a house. And that didn't happen. And then thank you to a friend, Andy Allen, who with Timberwood Construction, he stepped in and I had gone to him in January, not this January, but the January before, and said, hey, can you help me with this? And if it weren't for him, we wouldn't have built the house. Now we have this beautiful, 3,000 square foot house. My mom lives with me. We have space, and it's just been very healing to just move on and just to have.
You deserve all that.
Yeah, it's just at the same time, it's like hard to feel like you deserve it too.
Hard to be happy.
It's hard to because this was Joe. This is our dream together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm having to push through. And if it weren't for him, I would not have done this. Like it was not like he was heaven sent, because. Just I feel it's opposition within me. Like I shouldn't be moving forward. I shouldn't be happy about this. I shouldn't be, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like and so that was huge. And it's a space where we can invite other people in, because before like we felt like we were too cramped to do that. And so it's just that's been really healing, but we're plugging along one day at a time. I think we're slowly getting past this and cracking it open more, and I'm able to talk to it with my little ones with it. But
yeah, well, thanks for opening up and being brave and talking about Joe and Jace, and I hope your family can keep talking about them. I hope this podcast helps. I think just being able to listen to your mom talk about this could help too. So.
And because there's stories that I haven't told them, so it might crack it open. They might want to know more, and it did. Because last time I went home and I talked to my son, who's 21, on the way to Oregon, and that was we hadn't really talked in depth about much of it.
Yeah, it's like if you've never talked, it's hard to start talking about it. It just is, and the longer you go without talking about it, the harder it gets to talk about it for whatever reason. So yeah.
And I've realized how just quiet I was, and I'm like, okay, I've got to get more out of my head, because that's not good, not healthy for them.
Yeah.
So it's a process, and you want a quick fix, unfortunately, but there is no quick fix. It's just enduring to the end.
Yeah.
It's just keep going, and
one day at a time.
Right. And that's one thing for me. Okay.
I knew there was something.
There's an important. So for me, anybody who's struggling, okay, I started with 1 minute. Can I do this for 1 minute? I couldn't exercise. I couldn't do anything. So I was like, can I just do it for 1 minute?
Like sit in your own body.
Right.
For 1 minute.
Can I exercise? So I'd exercise for 1 minute, and then I would go do something like cleaning or whatever for 1 minute. And I'd go back to exercising, because I found if I exercised in the morning, then I could function better. Not every day, but I did. It was a lot better. And so, but if I wanted to do something, I would exercise for 1 minute, and then I would go organize or clean my closet for 1 minute. And so
like the power of 1 minute, just one. Like we think that doesn't matter. Like one person doesn't matter. We think 1 minute doesn't matter, but it's like it's the steps you take. That's the baby steps. Sometimes it's just in being infantile and taking those baby steps.
Yeah, sometimes it's just breathing. Like you have to just breathe. Can you breathe? And you're like, yeah, like it's that dark sometimes.
Could I just go? And I had so much anxiety, so many panic attacks. I'm like, I would just have to like go to church and be there as long as I could and then step out and repeat any situation because everything was so triggering. I want to say I had PTSD.
Yeah, I like your example or metaphor thing of your baby and then you're a kid and then you're a teenager.
But don't you see it now?
Yeah,
do you see that?
When you're saying, I'm like, wow, like, yeah. Like,
because you're like, you're like, emotions are just like all over the place. So,
and like, there's like this weird, like a teenager, like this weird ego feeling of like, I don't deserve to do anything hard again. And life should just be easy for me. And things should just be given to me now because I went through something so hard. And like, actually, no, life doesn't care. It'll keep just giving you a shit sandwich. Like it doesn't care.
Get up and do it yourself. Yeah. Otherwise it doesn't. Yeah. You're not going to heal unless you heal yourself.
Yeah.
And it just continue to do like 1 minute at a time. Sometimes it's all like, just keep going.
Yeah. Rachel, thanks again for coming on. Life's 10% what happens to you and 90% what you're going to do about it.